In the Abobo district of Abidjan, minibus staff hustle for passengers. They have to fill their backer as quickly as possible. These privately operated buses are the most affordable way to get around Ivory Coast's thriving economic capital.
It's exhausting, first of all because of the roads, all the travelling, having to hit the brakes all the time.
With all the traffic jams, heat and pollution, his work can often be a true ordeal.
You wouldn't believe the fumes. Sometimes when there's a traffic jam, they are the diesel fumes. Everything fumes. It's overwhelming. Sometimes you can be stuck for 30 minutes in one place, not moving at all, and with all those scars, the fumes continue to build up.
Sidibe does a dozen trips a day. His shift isn't over until well after nightfall. When he returns to the room, he shares with his wife and 8 children.
Sometimes when you want to get to sleep, you can be lying there for an hour with a cracking headache. You just can't sleep. You ache, you run down. It's really not easy.
Headaches, lung problems, shortness of breath. Sidibe has never seen a doctor about this, but we describe the general symptoms to a lung specialist.
In chronic situations like these, as his daily life is to work in transportation, even if he's only exposed to low levels of air pollution, it will in time lead to these symptoms.
According to the World Health Organization, close to 1 million deaths a year in sub-Saharan Africa are attributable to air pollution. In 2016, the NGO Public Eye analysed the sulphur content in the diesel being sold in 8 countries, including Ivory Coast. The results were startling. Levels up to 378 times greater than the permitted limit in Europe. Dr. Umar Jibrila took part in that study.
2
years on, I think it's going to be interesting to find out whether our recommendations have been taken into account. Because our study highlighted the importance of lowering sulfur levels in the fuels that are sold throughout West Africa.
We chose 2 petrol stations at random, and so as not to implicate any particular company, we won't be naming the operators. We took petrol from one and diesel from the other.
So now that we've taken these samples, we're going to head to the laboratory to get the level of sulfur tested.
The analysis is done by a certified laboratory, the Abidjan branch of a global company. In less than 24 hours, we have the results.
So let's have a look. First, we have the results for diesel fuel. It reads 1,710 ppm, particles per million.
1,710 means a sulfur level 171 times higher than the European standard, set at 10 parts per million. The sulfur level in the petrol is far lower, at 16.3 parts per million. While these fuels are still highly harmful to health, they conform to limits set by the country. With 3,500 parts per million, the cutoff for diesel. And so do the authorities, as government solutions exist elsewhere. In 2015, countries in East Africa banned the import of fuels with sulfur rates over 50 parts per million.
We've done much better than all the other countries in the West African region, which have levels of 3,500, 5,000 and even 10,000 parts per million of sulfur in their diesel. The state refinery is striving to do far better, to reach the level of 50 parts per million for diesel.
SIR is the state-run refinery. It has not responded to interview requests. The government has promised to bring in standards at its refinery to reduce the rates for sulphur to below 50 parts per million by 2025. Yet, unlike its neighbour Ghana or countries in East Africa, the government hasn't moved to ban the import of finished fuels with high levels of sulphur. Meanwhile, air pollution is already the 4th greatest risk factor for death and disability in Ivory Coast.